Hey guys, hover mode's still giving many people headaches out there. We're going to be talking about that as well as a lot of UI related issues that we saw on Star Citizen Live where Disco questioned the UI team. It's going to be an interesting one. Stay tuned. More after these messages. Today's video has been brought to you by the generous patrons of the games who make continued content on the games possible. The games patrons enjoy monthly giveaways like Steam gift cards, Star Citizen packages, and any game that you want giveaways. Please consider donating just $1 if in any way you enjoy the game's content. So I garnered a lot of information from this past Star Citizen Live video where Jared basically questions the UI designers, and in most cases it was a little bit interesting to me to see that some of the issues brought up by the community were in my opinion the first times that the UI designers have heard of things. For instance, like this.
Cargo UI. Let's talk about cargo UI. Right now, players have to go back to Chaos to see the inventory of what they're carrying on their ships. Do we have any plans for implementing some kind of shipboard cargo UI so that we can see what we're carrying without having to get to a destination first?
Yeah, there definitely should be.
Yep,
yeah.
It's something that we will look at. Yes, so we know that's needed, and yeah, where it comes in the timeline, I'm not sure, but at some point, yeah.
And to me, what you can see is that these problems weren't really in the forefront of the UI designers' minds. It's a little bit concerning to me that issues like this aren't some things that are even present in their design process when they're dealing with UI. But there were other issues that were important to all of us that are definitely being worked on, and that is something concerning all of our thoughts about hover mode and how it just seems to be a mess right now, and how UI can help with hover mode. So this was a pretty interesting portion of the Star Citizen Live dealing with UI and hover mode and how it can help.
Can you update us on plans for the landing UI improvements needed for the implementation of hover mode? It's hard to land in hover mode, is basically what they're saying.
So when we actually a while back we changed the method that we actually used to render the UI from what was called 3DI to render the texture. So it's actually rendered as part of the screens, and it actually takes all of the kind of post effects and everything. So the original landing UI that replaced the radar, what it was built on was the 3DI tech, and that just wasn't compatible with the rendered texture. So that's kind of how we lost it. So we're looking at bringing that back in some capacity, but maybe with just as a better design. We're just focusing mainly on the structure and the layout of the MFDs right now, kind of defining, as I said, like what contexts are available, what things should be displayed where, when, how. But yeah, that's definitely something that we need, and as part of that, also potentially having some kind of like guide system as well. So you can, in having some AR element that is displayed in conjunction with that widget.
So that was interesting. And another really interesting point brought up was the readability of the UI in different types of environments. We all know in certain types of environments you can't even see any of the UI, and it just blends in with the background. And here was the explanation in regards to possible fixes. But again, talking about this, it did seem like certain issues were not really thought of that the community brought up, which is why it's important for us to voice out there, hey, these are some issues that we're having as a community. And sometimes I think there's this disconnect, like these guys aren't really even playing the game, which concerns me, because like I see a lot of the responses to these concerns brought up by the community, and sometimes I think that like are you guys even playing the game? Because it seems like that you guys are dealing with these issues for the first time, or aren't aware of exactly what's going on, more absorbed in the coding, more absorbed in the letters and the numbers, and not actually in the game playing it, having the issues that we are having while we play the game. So let's watch this about the readability or being able to read the UI in different types of environments.
One of the big problems here, let's get into it. How do we intend to improve the legibility of UI elements that tend to sit over the environment an environment that can sometimes be very glaring. I mean, everybody who's played Star Citizen has experienced this. If you point your ship anywhere remotely near the star at the center of the Crusader system, all of your UI elements wash out. What are we intending to do about that?
So there's a few kind of more in-world solutions that we're looking at. I mean, the obvious thing you can do is, potentially add a drop shadow of the UI or just make it black or something, but that just kind of destroys the aesthetic of what we're trying to go for. So one thing that we're looking at is, and we started this a bit with the Gladius side, although it's not completely there yet, is having some system where it's contextually, it's dynamically taking the brightness of the environment and adjusting the brightness of the UI in response to that. In addition, to make things look and feel much more in-world, we want to kind of have the HUDs displayed on actual geometry that you can see. So it kind of grounds it in the world much better. But as part of that, we can kind of leverage that to maybe dynamically tint that, in addition to brightening the UI based upon environmental conditions. So it's a much more, we're thinking of that as like a much more like in-world, and it uses it leverages the in-game elements in a way that's kind of, it's more convincing than just kind of making it like black or something.
There's a whole interesting section that they get into about custom MFD presets that we've been talking about. Let's look at that.
Are there intentions to add the ability to save custom MFD configuration presets for individual players' preferences?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's got to persist at some point. It's just the issue is now is just it doesn't persist.
Right.
So in our new UI tech, the UI will be what we call stateless. So it won't store anything. It won't store any state about itself. It takes everything from like an entity or what's on the server. So basically, when we go to develop the MFD or implement the new design that we're working on, by that point, hopefully we'll be able to persist. Like, as you enter and exit the seat, you'll see the same screens that you were on before, even if you've tabbed over or you've shifted things around. So it's definitely something we want to.
Yeah. Another thing related to that, we want to, when we do this pass on the MFDs, we want to make sure that we're showing the most important information by default as well. Yeah. So I'm sure people will be able to change things and so on, but it would mean that there'd be less need for the kind of the first-time player, for example, to swap things around. Hopefully, it'll be set up in a way that's good for the general players.
Potentially presets as well that you can quickly activate. You may want something that's a screen configuration. When we go to kind of enable the visor configuration as well, having presets associated with those that you can quickly access is something we can look at as well.
Yeah, plenty of things to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ship MFDs, put it diplomatically, can be a bit cumbersome. Having to drill down from one menu to the next menu to the next menu to the next menu to finally get to the thing that you're looking for. And in a combat situation, those seconds can be deadly. I know we're in the process of working out a complete refactor of the ship MFDs, right?
That is correct.
Anything you can tell us about that?
So, where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start? I mean, I already kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, right now, I guess the most obvious thing is that like they're just small and they're scaled down. They're not readable. And I mean, we used to have what we would call these support screens, where we kind of have this screen that had minimal information on it, but its font size was made in a way that was legible. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of looking at this system where, by default, you have a kind of a contextually a different setup on your screens. A setup, I mean, a more minimized display. So it's like showing you really only what you need to know. but where all the font sizes are very legible. So it's really just about how much pixels the screen is taking up on your screen, on your monitor, when you're kind of in the default view. But when you're focused in on a screen, what that can do is it can contextually change to something that's more in depth that we want on the MFDs. So whether you're focusing in on MFD or you're in flight mode, that will contextually change to present you with always readable information.
I get you.
Yeah. So
so when you're sitting back in your seat, the
layout
MFDs will change, and it'll be only the most necessary information, big, legible, and then when you zoom in and look into it, it'll sense that and it'll change and reformulate and show you more information.
Yeah, actually, the cool thing about the UI tech that I'm helping develop is that we're kind of taking cues from the area of like web development, because that's my background too, so I know a lot about it. But you have this thing called responsive design, so you can have rules set up where beyond a certain point, like if there's a box in our UI that goes beyond a certain point, that you shrinks down beyond a certain point, that you can actually have different styles or visual descriptions applied to that, and conditionally depending on maybe how much it's sized. So we're kind of leveraging that to help with the reformulation of the UI on screens, as well as when we're laying things out and when we potentially open up customization, that can be really helpful as like a tool to help us manage and maintain the UI, because even on like different size screens in the game, you have like 69, you have 4 3s, you have 1 1s. Currently, we have to maintain 3 different binary files for those. And if you want to make a change in one, well, you have to go into each binary file and make that same change. But if we can just maintain one UI and then just have these different style rules applied to it, then it makes it much easier to maintain. So you just change one thing and it changes for every different manufacturer or every different kind of configuration.
And then I think this is something that all of us can agree upon, and this is a compass ribbon in your visor when you're having FPS fights or when you're down on a planet or a moon. And interestingly enough, they talked about how integrating different areas of design usually what ends up happening is this is how we find out that it's just not UI's department. It has to do with other departments. For instance, the UI, simply placing a UI compass based ribbon where it gives us directions would be very difficult, because it would have to have a system behind it that would give it true directions, and that you would need to program in poles or a satellite system around that could fix directional code into this UI compass. So let's look at that a little bit. I thought this was an interesting conversation.
Has there been any discussion about adding a compass ribbon, giving us cardinal directions on planets or moons?
So, well, I suppose that's another of those is what's the reason for wanting it? So it's
what's the reason for wanting to know what direction you're going?
Well, yes, but there are other ways to solve that potentially. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a compass widget. One thing we're looking into, you probably saw it on one of the earlier videos, when we showed the area map, this interior map, I think we had it on there. We had a little mock-up of a personal radar that kind of shows you like a mini map, essentially. Something like that could show you your direction, for example. So having a little compass is not necessarily the only solution, but as we revise the HUD, the visor stuff, which we're starting at the moment, then if it seems like that's a compass, for example, is really necessary, then we'd certainly consider that and investigate it.
Yeah, it's probably not out of the question. It's just, you also have to take into account that the planets are procedurally generated, and you kind of have to have a way to define what's north, west, east, south.
Exactly. We'd have to create poles. We have to create poles for the planet, simulate magnetic poles, as it were, and then, be able to position you.
Yeah, and you can solve some of the navigation problems with things like if we had some kind of sat nav like system in there, which I know there were some questions about in the chat. Something like that could also solve the problem in a different way. So there's
the comments driven is more than just a UI question, because again, you can't just program a UI thing and have it work. There's system design that has to go into it in order to build a relationship on that planet that lets you lock to it. And then of course there'd have to be different ones for every single planet and moon, and it would have to know when you're transferring from one to another, and so because you don't want to be on Yella and have it be pointing you towards north on Hurston and stuff like that. So
there's a lot of these edge cases make UI complicated sometimes. We think we've got something really easy to do, and then there's these 5 things that we hadn't thought about.
Yeah. It's one of those things, there are a lot of things that sometimes seem like they're a UI issue, and it's not. It can be a system design issue.
And then we got into talk a little bit about how they do own some of the tech that is involved with implementing UI directly into the game. And this is another issue where, people are still not believing me when I say that Cloud Imperium does in fact own certain technologies in the process of making this game, and licensing out that technology can bring in further revenue to make this game a reality. We want this game to become a reality, and in order for them to do that, they have to find other revenue streams, and owning tech and licensing out this tech is something that I'm pretty sure Cloud Imperium is going to do to bring in additional revenue streams. And here we talk about owning particular portions of tech involved into bringing UI directly into the game, skipping over the Flash that they had been using for years, and they want to just X out Flash altogether and bring in their own tech. So that this is an interesting conversation. Let's watch this.
We kind of cut out the process of actually authoring the UI in Flash, and it's actually our own tools and our own data-driven system. But we're still using Scaleform to draw the vectors. So we boil it down to just the renderer. So things like when we're drawing borders, we're drawing backgrounds, we're drawing like curved corners and things like that, and then we're rendering text. That's all it really does, and everything else on top of that is our own code and our own system. So at some point, we will take that render and we will build our own. So it's almost like an abstraction layer between our own tools and our own development and the renderer, and then at some point we switch that out for just be completely rid of it.
How long have you been waiting to kill Flash?
Since I started the company 6 years ago, even more than that.
One thing that's really cool that we're finding as well is, because we kind of own this tech and we've got a team working on it, we can say, I suppose, just going back to Flash, Flash was originally designed as an animation system for web stuff. So if you wanted to make a bar in that, you can do it. It takes a little time. But if someone goes, I don't like that kind of bar, can you turn it into a dial? That's going to take loads of extra work. Whereas with the building block stuff, we can just swap those over. And also, for example, if the dial thing didn't exist yet, we can just go to the programs and say, we could really do with the dial widget. And once that's made, then we can reuse that wherever we want to within the rest of the UI. So it gives us a lot of control as developers.
And that's it, guys. I thought this was a very eye-opening episode of Star Citizen Live. UI is a very important element in the game design, and I only expect it to get better, especially with all your help, guys. Thank you so much. I will see you on the next vid. My kids are walking around upstairs. Don't forget to buy the merch and look at our Patreon page, Anvil Arrow giveaway. See you on the next vid, guys.